Hi, this is Moses from Wilderness Cave, and you are listening to Tale of the Manticore.
The following podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Tale of the Manticore, Season 3. Like the creature from which it takes its name, Tale of the Manticore is a mashup, a crossbreeding between two different species of storytelling. Here you will find the unpredictability of old-school paper and dice games with the storycraft of a dark fantasy novel. No character is sacred, and none will be spared if the dice decide their fate is at hand. According to lore, the tale of a manticore is barbed with cruel iron spikes. There will be much pain in the days ahead. Last time on Tale of the Manticore. In Chapter 12, the exhausted companions are forced to abandon their pursuit of the three fleeing orcs and refocus their efforts on finding a place to rest for the night. However, this proves to be more difficult than they expected, partly because they are in hostile Black Cloud territory, but mostly because of the flocks of noisy crows who harass them and threaten to draw unwanted attention. In an effort to avoid the birds, the companions move into a mist-filled ravine where they discover a cave which is occupied by something large, judging by the sound of snoring coming from within. Dureni wants to sneak past it, but Tentir wants to turn back, so Achillea breaks the tie and sides with Dureni. While the party does manage to pass by the cave mouth without waking whatever is inside, they unfortunately encounter yet another group of crows on the far side. When the birds caw in alarm, the monster in the cave wakes up. Now the party must deal with Mombi, the ogre. A brutal fight ensues, in which Cord's life is almost lost, but in the end, the party is victorious. The Song of the Woods, Verse 1.
With whispers soft and swaying leaves, the emerald vault high above, where shadows dance and creatures love, gives everything the heart believes. Sunlight filters through the trees, a golden touch on mossy ground, as secrets hide in silence found, and every path a story weaves.
I think I forgot to mention in the last episode that the set-piece encounter with Mombi was actually the result of the current mythic event meaning, Move Stalemate. Over the years, Mombi was sometimes hired by the Black Cloud tribe to fight on their side, and, concerning their recent dispute with the Bloodfoot tribe, the intention was to pay him to break, or move, the stalemate. Anyway, with that event meaning spent, I need to roll a new one. Let's quickly do that before we begin Part 1. Undy percentile, a 70, extravagance, and 61, death. Extravagant death? Extravagance of death. No idea what to do with this yet, but that's a later issue, not a now issue. I'm ready to move on with the story. Let's jump in. Chapter 13, Part 1, Day 12. Late night. Mythic event meaning. Extravagance, death. Party status. Achillea, 7 of 7 hit points. Cord, 1 of 11 hit points. Dureni, 6 out of 6. Tentir, 5 out of 6. Supplies. The companions have 11 portions of food and 6 of water. Spells available. Achillea has memorized Message. Cord can cast Locate plants and animals. Achillea looked down at their fallen foe. A pool of dark blood was spreading out underneath it. Everything had all happened so quickly that, from the moment the crows raised the alarm to the moment the huge hairy brute had burst out of the cave swinging its immense club, she had barely had time to think. All she had been aware of was an onslaught of savagery and strength, and by Ahea, it had been strong. So powerful that when it hit Cord, it had almost. Achillea looked at her friend, who limply held his bloody battle axe after wrenching it free of the monster's skull. Cord was swaying like a sapling in the wind, or rather, like a pair of saplings. The ogre's strike had split his torso in two, and now his body was cleft in a V.
Oh, Cord! Oh, no.
She rushed over to help, pushing his two halves together and frantically looking around for something with which to bind them. Tentir saw what she was doing and moved to aid her. The dead ogre was naked, save for a leather thong it wore around its neck that was strung with rat skulls. The young elf crouched over the dead monster and undid it with shaking fingers. Once it was released, he held it up by one end to allow the skulls to fall off, and then passed it to Achillea. She accepted the strip and used it to bind her friend together. When she was done, she stepped back and inspected her work. The leather would hold, but the wound, if that's what it should be called, looked bad.
Are you all right?
She asked, knowing he was not. Cord teetered drunkenly before managing a bow.
You just need to rest a while.
Said Achillea, trying to muster a smile.
You'll be fine.
She heard herself saying the words and knew she sounded ridiculous. What would she do if she lost Cord? The thought was unbearable. If she hadn't been so tired, she might have cried. Direni and Tentir were right beside her, but they were looking at their fallen enemy.
I think this is an ogre,
said Direni.
I've never seen one before, but, well, that's what I think it is.
Let's roll it into the ravine,
suggested Tentir. It took all three of them to do it. The brute must have weighed over 300 pounds, but luckily, gravity helped them with the job, and before long, Achillea and the two brothers had managed to roll the corpse all the way out of the cave and down to the bottom of the gulch.
We need rest,
said Direni, panting. He looked ahead to where the crow-filled tree had been. It was empty of occupants now. All was silent and still, save for the companion's labored breathing.
Robin, where are you?
Called Achillea. The little taxidermied bird responded immediately to her voice, flitting over from a nearby tree.
My little Robin,
Achillea said, holding the little construct on her index finger.
Tonight I need you to be brave and alert. Can you look over us while we sleep, and while Cord rests?
Robin tweeted out something that sounded affirmative, and whether or not the little bird truly understood Achillea's instructions, the rest of the companions laid down on the cave floor and let sleep engulf them. Before I can continue the story, I need to make a few rolls for the next day's hex crawl. Here's a d20 to roll for the weather. I got a 14. That's a good day for travel. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a nice summer day. I'll roll the same die again for stumble upon. A 1 or a 20 will mean something terrible or wonderful will be discovered. Here's the roll. A 4, no result there. Next is for wandering encounters. I think the companions will break free from these woods as soon as they're able, if for no other reason than to escape the flock of crows that has brought them so much trouble. That means, on my d6, only on a 5 or 6 will they encounter anything. Here comes the roll. A 4. All right, they can pass through a good bit of Black Cloud territory unhindered, and I think just one more day will see them clear of the Orklands. While I have my dice handy, I also want to roll to see if the party finds any special treasure in the ogre's lair. I'll use this d20 one more time. The higher the number, the greater the reward. Let's say that on a 19 or 20, there's something really significant to be found in Mombi's cave. The roll. Oh, a 19. I was really not expecting that. Okay, this is going to require a bit of thought, and I wonder if I can use my new event meaning to figure out what it should be. I'm also wondering if the treasure could be magical. Had I rolled a 20, I'd say yes, for sure. But with a 19, I'll say it's 50-50 and roll a high-low check. High means yes, on a d20. An 8, so it's not magical, but it is still valuable and possibly significant in other ways. No good ideas are coming to me right now, though. I think I need to go away and think about this for a few hours. I'll be back in a bit. Okay, I ended up sleeping on it, and I've got this idea that, in addition to several boxes of coins, Mombi has gathered together a small collection of skulls. To him, they are more precious and more interesting than gold and silver. One of the skulls in his collection happens to be a relic from the not-too-distant former land of the Caymores. Who were the Caymores? They were a race of men who eventually discovered and founded the kingdom now known as Camertine. I went into some detail about that civilization in Season 2, but there's no need for any lore now, at least not yet. All we need to know is that one of Mombi's skulls is the jet and turquoise-encrusted skull of a long-dead prince. After his death, ages ago, he was honored by having his skull transformed into a work of art. Extravagant death, if you please. Over the centuries, this treasure got lost or stolen, perhaps changed hands many times over, and somehow it eventually ended up in Mombi's collection. Whether or not this relic will have a part to play in Achillea's story going forward, well, that's anybody's guess. Before I return to the story, there's one last thing I need to do. Having used up my current event meaning, I need a replacement. Here we go, using my D percentile. I've got a 22, befriend, and 24, tension. Okay, I can work with that. But you know what? I've just had a notion. Instead of going back to the PCs, I'm going to do something a little different. Chapter 13, Part 2, Day 12, Late Night, Mythic Event Meaning, Befriend Tension. Otot the Dream Shaper was ancient by the standards of his race. Having seen over 80 winters, the orc shaman's body was shrunken and frail. His spine was bent like a question mark, and his wrinkled gray skin sagged limply from the bone. He was blind. In fact, he had put out both of his own eyes long ago, in sacrifice to the all-powerful deity, Grumsh. But Otot was not without vision of a kind. His rats and his crows, especially his crows, watched for him and spoke to him. They were bound to his soul and did his bidding. He was also a gifted dream shaper and saw much in his waking visions. But it was the crows who provided him with information tonight. They whispered to him, and Otot whispered back. There were new intruders in his lands. Not the troublesome bloodfoot orcs, but a different kind of trespasser. Fey folk, the crows had said. 4 of them. They had slain some of his warriors, and they would pay for that. It had been easy enough for his crows to drive them down into Mombi's ravine. There, they would find death. There could be no other outcome. Perhaps, by now, they already had. Otot the Dream Shaper smiled a toothless smile. Chapter 13, Part 3, Day 13, Morning, Mythic Event Meaning, Befriend Tension, Party Status. The party status is unchanged, with the exception of Cord and Tentir, who have gained 1 hit point through natural healing and now have 2 out of 11 and 6 out of 6, respectively. Achillea's eyes flicked open as she awoke. Direni was gently shaking her by one shoulder.
Get up, Achillea,
he said. She sat up and looked around.
Is everything?
We're safe,
Came the elf's reply.
but we need to be going soon.
Achillea knuckled sleep from her eyes and looked around the cave. Tentir was already up, looking at something deeper inside. The lair smelled strongly of urine, and there was another bad odor, too. Sour decay. She knew where it was coming from. They'd rolled the ogre's heavy corpse down to the bottom of the ravine, but that wasn't very far away. The flies would find it soon, or else the crows would. The crows. Thinking of them, she felt disquieted. Those birds were not normal, and Direni was right. They did need to get moving soon. She got up and stretched her stiff muscles. She'd been too exhausted the night before to bother unrolling her bedroll, so there was nothing to put away. She'd simply used her pack as a pillow and slept on the cool stone floor of the cave. Suddenly, she remembered what had happened to Cord the night before. She turned to him.
How are you feeling?
The construct did not look good. He was making an awkward attempt to tighten a leather binding that held the 2 halves of his sundered torso together.
Let me help.
She offered. Cord allowed her to retie the knots and make them very snug, but he still looked bad. How he could ever recover from this wound, she could not imagine. When she was done, she looked at Dureni.
I'm ready.
She told him, thinking the brothers were probably waiting on her.
We'll leave in a moment. Tentir is just checking the back of the cave in case there's anything.
Come over here,
Came the younger elf's voice, right on cue. Tentir had discovered some things deeper inside the cave. There were numerous scattered animal bones, big and small. He also found several dung heaps. Some were fresh and pungent, while others were old and had dried into hard patties. There were no exits or tunnels inside the cave, but there was a small cavity into which the ogre had piled his valuables. This treasure included 4 boxes that looked almost identical to the coin box carried by the companions. 3 of these boxes were empty, but the 4th still contained some coins. Tentir counted out 25 gold pieces and 45 silver. He put the money in his belt pouch and left the boxes behind. The final item in the cache was a filthy leather sack that made a hollow rattling sound as though it were full of wooden bowls when Tentir picked it up. He opened it, looked inside, and made a face.
Ugh, it's full of skulls.
He said through a frown.
And it stinks.
Put it away, Tentir. Let's go.
Said Dureni. The older elf was removing the coins from the box he had been carrying, so he could be rid of the extra weight.
Hold on. There's something else in here.
Replied Tentir. He put his hand into the sack and fished out a round, black object. He held it up and regarded it, cocking his head in a bemused manner.
What in Chuchin's name is this?
He put down the sack and walked over, holding forth the strange object for the others to see. A thin strip of morning sun had penetrated the canopy and fell across the mouth of the cave in a beam. Tentir entered it and held the thing up in order to see it better. It was a skull, but strangely decorated with shiny black and green stones.
That's a human skull, I think.
Said Achillea. She'd never seen one before, but she had known 3 humans, and this seemed to be about the right size, if a little small.
Perhaps a child's.
It's strange. I don't much like it.
Said Tentir. He was still frowning.
I'll keep it then.
Said Achillea simply, and held out her hand. Tentir seemed glad to be rid of the macabre treasure. He gave it to Achillea, and she tucked it into her bag. Then, with nothing left to do, the companions left the cave, stepped over the dead ogre's corpse, and exited the ravine on the far side. They crested the rise after a few minutes of hard effort. Each of them had the same thought as they climbed. It had been wise to stay and fight the night before, as the incline was both steep and treacherous. At the top, more arrows of sunlight pierced the treetops and slanted down against the forest floor. Birds chirped merrily, and a light wind made the leaves above hiss. Pleasant as it was, Dureni commented that it would be best if they left the woods as soon as they were able. Everyone agreed, and they made their way, single file, in the direction the elven brothers guessed was north. After a couple of hours, they were free of the forest. Now, in front of them was an expanse of hilly scrub and large jutting shards of bald rock. Far in the distance, Tentir noticed a dark cloud wheeling through the sky, as though it were alive.
Look,
He said quietly. Everyone knew what it was.
Should we go back into the woods?
Asked Achillea.
We can't stay here forever. Let's wait and see if they go away and then move ahead.
Came Dureni's reply. After a few minutes, the crows did fly away.
that was lucky.
Remarked Tentir.
I wonder if that's where the orc tribe takes its name.
Achillea mused.
But even with the crows gone, is the way ahead safe?
Far from it.
Conceded Dureni.
But like the orcs say, Pikno ad Sadalanar Dorob.
I didn't know you spoke Orcish.
Said Achillea.
He doesn't.
Laughed Tentir.
But every elf knows that saying.
Well, I don't.
Said Achillea, reddening slightly. Tentir's goofy smile wilted.
It means
Began Dureni in a flat voice.
the fastest way out is through.
He walked away from the tree line, followed by Tentir and then Achillea, with Cord behind her, and Robin perched atop her head. Dramatis Personae. Dureni. 20 years ago.
fastest way out is through,
joked Elmir.
The only way you'll ever fix your shot is to practice, until the problem goes away.
This advice came from Durrani's archery mentor. A patient, demanding and amiable elf of just over 80 years of age, Elmir loved a good proverb and never passed up a chance to use one.
So now we take our advice from the orcs?
Asked Durrani wryly. He sighed and knocked another arrow to his bowstring. Elmir was one of those people who laughed with their mouth closed.
Don't lose heart. Try again. Remember, your legs are just as important to your aim as your arms. Shoulder width apart, knees slightly bent, as we practiced.
Durrani did as he was told, but inside he was beginning to wonder if he would ever develop this skill any further.
Very good. Arms straight.
Elmir tapped him under the elbow with his fingertips, and Durrani locked his arm.
Don't squeeze the bow so hard. Better. Now draw. But not that far. That's where you're going wrong, Durrani. That's why your aim is off. Your draw should match your intended distance. You don't always want to pull the arrow back all the way.
Durrani steadied his breathing and sighted down the shaft before releasing the string from his fingertips. His arrow streaked towards its target, a practice dummy set up at a distance of 60 feet with a red flower placed over the heart as a bullseye. The missile struck the target, but 4 inches to the left of the flower. Durrani slumped, but Elmir was not disheartened.
Practice, Durrani. You only need more practice. There's no way around it. No elf ever mastered the bow when they first picked it up.
I didn't just pick it up,
sneered Durrani bitterly.
It takes years to master,
replied Elmir, unfazed.
The orcs have the right of it in this case, my friend. The fastest way out is through.
Orcs are nocturnal, and so while the party travels, most of the Black Cloud tribe is asleep. Otot the Dream Shaper is too, but the shaman is never really unconscious. He just drifts between 2 different modes of conscious awareness. When Otot sleeps, he dreams, and his dreams bring the power of clairvoyance. In some cases, they even give him the power of divination. During the day, Otot sees through the eyes of his crows. Achillea was right to guess that this is where the tribe takes its name. By midday, the birds would have discovered Mombi's corpse and reported back to their master. Otot would also learn from his spies that none of the 4 trespassers had fallen to the ogre, and he would deduce that they must be a formidable enemy. Presently, Otot is using his crows to look for the companions, but the birds, and therefore he, can't see everything at once. I wonder what the chance would be that he'd find them. Now, I've already rolled for wandering encounters for this day, and I determined that there would be none, but this is different. In essence, Otot is casting a kind of spell. With that in mind, I think a saving throw for the entire party to see if they can avoid being spotted is in order. Eyeballing all my character sheets, I see that the average saving throw against spells among the PCs is 16, so that's what I'm going to use. If they fail, Otot will see them. He might even learn something more than just their location. If the PCs succeed, they'll manage to avoid the shaman's winged spies. Here's the roll. I got an 8. If they'd critically failed the roll, I might have given Otot a little extra divination power. But that did not happen, so the shaman will learn where the party is, but that's about it. And that leads me to wonder, what can he do with this information? By now, the PCs are 75% of the way through Black Cloud territory, having been in it for 1.5 days. By nightfall, they'll be clear. If Otot's lair is located in the middle of his tribe's land, then the party would have passed it by now. It's going to come down to this. At what time do the crows spot the party? If it's early enough in the day, Otot will be able to take some action. If not, it'll be too late to intercept them. I'm just going to roll a d10. Whatever number shows on the die, that's what o'clock it is in the game, when the PCs are spotted. Here's the roll. Whoa, a 10. That's pretty conclusive. The dice gods have decided that, by the time Otot's spies find the party, the sun has already set, and the trespassers have more or less already left Black Cloud territory. Otot will not pursue. There'd be nothing to gain by that, but he will assign one of his crows to watch his northern border for the next few weeks. If the 4 intruders should try to return this way, he'll be ready for them. Chapter 13. Part 4. Day 13. Evening. Mythic event meaning. Befriend tension. Party status. The party's status is unchanged. Since they traveled in single file in the elven manner, there was little conversation between the companions as they made their way north. The sun still shone, and the wind provided a cooling breeze, so the going had not been so difficult, despite the rough and hilly terrain. Achillea's white gold hair was bound up in a ponytail, and it bounced against her back in time with her steady steps as they hiked. The companions maintained a brisk pace, stopping only for short breaks to rest, drink water, and scan the skies for the dark cloud of crows they wished to avoid. Eventually the sun began to set, and the sky above the horizon became banded with washed-out hues of indigo, salmon, and orange. Before the light of day had completely disappeared, Tentir pointed out a copse of stunted pines in the distance. They would make for a decent shelter for the night, they agreed, much better than sleeping out in the open. Before they reached the cover of the pines, they saw the dark miasma of the crows darken a patch of distant sky one last time. Tentir was confident that they had not been spotted, but Dureni wasn't so sure.
We should keep a careful watch tonight, just in case,
he suggested. Achillea communicated the elf's suggestion to Cord, for it was upon his shoulders that the responsibility really fell. Cord nodded, creaking as he bent, to let Achillea know that he would remain vigilant through the night, and the others unpacked their bedrolls and slept under the pine branches. Unlike the previous night, this time, Achillea dreamt in vivid clarity. She was in a dark woods, but no place she recognized. The trees weren't the right kind of trees. Stunted pines and mossy oaks, arranged rank after rank, and receding into the distance as far as the eye could see in every direction. And there were other things that were not quite right. Her voice, even though it was just the sound of her breathing, wasn't familiar, and she felt strange in her own skin. Most of all, as it was night, she should be seeing the forest in the grayscale of infravision. But this was not the case. Instead, everything was bathed in a silvery sheen from the moonlight where it penetrated the leafy canopy above. Presently, Achillea was running, and she felt afraid. Was something chasing her? No, there was nothing behind her. She was running because she was lost in a forest labyrinth. Her feet pounded the ground as she ran, while the wind made the leaves whisper conspiratorially all around. There was no path to follow, just endless columns of trees. Still she ran, even though she had no idea where she was going, and had no sense of direction at all. More silver-limed oaks, more stunted pines washed in moonglow, so that they appeared almost blue. This kind of vision was so alien and strange, she couldn't see with anything like the clarity she was used to, and the many pockets of shadow and gloom filled her with dread. Eventually, when her lungs burned and her heart was beating hard in her chest, Achillea was forced to stop. She had come to the edge of a wide pond and had almost run straight into it. She faltered but did not fall as she stopped just at the waterline, breathing hard in that voice that was not her own. She looked down at the pond's surface. It was mirror smooth and reflected the surrounding treetops in a perfect but inverted copy. When she leaned forward, she gasped. Her reflection was not of her, not her own face, but a stranger's. Achillea raised a hand and her reflection did the same. She touched her face while gaping in amazement. The reflected image gaped back at her. It was a child's face. The face of a human boy. Thank you for listening to Tale of the Manticore. If you're enjoying the show and care to help to support it, there are lots of ways to do so. You can recommend the show online or to friends. You can like and repost episode announcements on social media. You can pick up one of my offerings on DriveThruRPG. You can purchase a Tale of the Manticore t-shirt at www.beararts.store. And finally, you can rate or review the show on your podcatcher of choice. I'm thankful for all of your support. Here's another kind listener review. This one was left by 34K Bro on YouTube. 34K Bro writes, "Great work, John. I painfully waited for Season 2 to be over before I listened. I know well that first D&D feeling. I had it back in Ontario in the late 1980s. Your show brings me close. I don't think I can wait for Season 3 to end. I'll start now. Well done, old boy." Thanks, 34K Bro. Another Ontarian, I see. I hope you're keeping warm this winter. If I have helped rekindle that 1980s flame in your heart, well, that's the best thing I can hear from my listeners, so thank you for that. I hope you enjoy Season 3. This episode features the voices of regulars, Kai Ellen and Kevin Berenger, playing Dureni and Tentir, respectively. It also introduces a new voice. In the role of Elmir the archery instructor, welcome to the show, Dan Grieg of Legends from the Fireside, another semi-actual play that you should absolutely be listening to. Thanks so much to the three of you for your excellent work. For listeners who are curious to learn more about Tale of the Manticore, I keep a blog where I post all kinds of show and RPG-related stuff, like art, maps, tables, crafts, and show notes. You can find it at taleofthemanticore.blogspot.com. To get in touch with me, I'm at Manticore Tale on X, Tale of the Manticore Podcast on Instagram, or taleofthemanticore@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. The adventure will continue on the next episode of Tale of the Manticore, the story where chaos rolls.